at this point in time, I would be surprised if Elon's not right. Before, I would have been surprised if Elon was right in his timeline predictions. Now I'm going to be surprised if he's not right.
I think for the people that don't live in New York City, I think for the people that live in New York City are probably listening to this, and I'm wondering, like, if they're thinking, wow, like, is it really true that there's a car that can drive itself through these scenarios, right? And
Yeah.
I think what it's hard to convey the aggressiveness of a driver in New York City, the how pedestrians behave on the road, how it's just chaos. It's complete,
Yeah.
especially during rush hour. It's complete and utter chaos. And so, let me ask you one more question here before I throw it over to Hans. The pedestrian handling specifically. What are you noticing with this version? How it behaves around pedestrians?
So I'll caveat at the start. It's not perfect. It just isn't yet. I think that it's going to take a lot more training data specific to New York City to get it perfect, because people are just ridiculously unpredictable here. Like, they'll dart out in the middle of the street, like as you were saying, the car will think that they're going to keep walking, but they're just peeking out into like traffic so that they can run across at the like last possible moment. So is it better? Yes. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. I've noticed it handles like hand waving. People like give you like the green light, go. It will do that. I think it's done a much better job of staying clear of the intersections instead of getting like hooked in the middle on like the corners, waiting to like make a right or a left. And I think it's doing a lot better job of like kind of, when like a lot of times the previous versions would get like stuck in the intersection because people would just like take advantage of the car being like stuck there. And now the car kind of like will creep through it. Every so often you'll need like one pedal tap because the car like really doesn't want to like mow down a crowd, which I don't blame it.
Yeah.
But it's way, 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 way better than it's ever been. I can't imagine it's obviously it's gonna get even better. I can't imagine how much better it will get, unless they are training specifically on New York City like pedestrian scenarios. People don't really have any like rules here.
Yeah. Go for it, Hans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, based on all of your experience down in like basically torture testing FSD in some of the worst scenarios possible in the United States, how do companies like Cruise and Waymo fare against Tesla FSD in these scenarios? Since they're obviously the leaders in self-driving technology, and they're obviously going to win.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've taken the Waymos in Arizona. It's hard to get in like a one for one comparison because the Waymos don't drive in New York. They don't have the city mapped. They don't have the scenarios that you could find in New York. That like they're not testing this, or at least not publicly yet. Maybe they are like behind the scenes. I have a hard time believing that they will ever get to a point where they can do like all roads. Like Waymo doesn't even do the highway yet. I can't imagine like it going from we're not going to do the highway at all to it's going to get on the FDR or the West Side Highway and just drive safely. They just don't have the data set for it yet. Maybe like maybe it will happen, but it's just not like it's not like it's an immediate thing. They have a ways to go, and if they have to map New York City, they have a Herculean task to do it properly. And the biggest problem with New York is roads that are here today are not there tomorrow. They're doing road work. Like right next to my apartment in the city, they're building a 25-story building, and 3 of the lanes are closed. How is the Waymo going to map through all of these issues? Sure, like it may be able to handle road closure. I've seen it do funky things. I've also seen the Waymos drive into like wet concrete before.
Yeah.
And circle around the block over and over and over again, and people just get trapped in them. I just don't see it yet. I would love to drive one in the city though, if they bring them here.
Yeah. I think that's one piece of knowledge there that I think it's very important to convey to the audience, specifically ones that don't follow this closely, is places like New York. some roads are just not available even at certain times within a day, like either for trash pickup, delivery pickup, right, or delivery and stuff like that. There's some, because a lot of these roads are one way and they're very narrow, and then sometimes what they have to just close the road, and then they have to get stuff done, and then they open it back up. Even if it's not officially closed, you just won't be able to get through because there's just people offloading and unloading, and then you just have nowhere to go, or the space you have to go through is so freaking tight that it's like you're like this much off from either side, right? And I think that's what's so interesting about Tesla's approach, is that because they're going with the vision-based neural net end-to-end approach, they're not dependent on maps and knowing what roads are available to them. They just handle the situation as it comes. And so the super interesting thing here is that you can take Chuck Cook's car in Florida that is running on version 13, and you can literally drop that exact car in New York City, and it will do exactly what your car is doing. And that gets lost in this whole discussion with the broader public that doesn't understand this approach deeply. And what's even more interesting is that this is really one of the very first public versions of FSD 13 that is out there in the public, right? So like your point of like, how is this going to improve? How is this going to improve? You know, it's like
there's a long list of changes that are like in the coming soon section. Like they're supposed to scale the model for the car, like the literal data set 3 times. The contextual window, which is very important because it needs to see signs that are like very far back in the city and on these highways. The car only has like a certain amount of memory. Like it's kind of like a person with Alzheimer's. Like it only remembers like a short amount of time right now. And in order for it to drive in these scenarios where it like sees signage like 500, 600, 700 feet back, it's got to remember that stuff. So I think that 3x contextual like improvement and the model scaling on their own are literally like going to be a massive leap. We're running like I know ChatGPT and like Grok, they have like the mini versions of the models, right? That's what we're running right now. I know Omar from Whole Mars catalog has the same thing, same thought. This is FSD 13 like mini right now. At least that's how I understand the release notes and everything. Yeah. And I mean, it's only going to get better is the scariest part.
For sure. Hans, can you give us like a quick like summary of why the model scaling 3xing is such a big deal?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple of different things we've touched on here. The model is already 3 times bigger, so that's like the overall size of the brain. So, the human cortex is significantly larger than, say, a monkey's cortex, and that allows us to do a whole bunch of cool things that monkeys just straight can't do. And the model size for FSD version 13 getting 3 times larger, it's very similar overall dynamic that is at play there. But then the other thing that you said, it's not only is the model bigger, but then the context length is going to be 3 times bigger. So that's context length is kind of like working memory. It's almost, if you understand computers, it's almost like RAM. It's the information that the model has immediate access to as it's trying to think through, what is it that I need to do to make this decision? And, this is something that is easy to understand. If you have to make any sort of decision, like the context that you're using to make the decision has a dramatic impact on the decision that you're going to make. And so giving it the information that it needs to make the proper decision and having more available information is a very important piece of the puzzle. And it's one of the things that just overall in machine learning, we find that really improves. Like that was one of the first things that when ChatGPT started to get better, it's like, okay, hey, if we can just give it more context window, more things that it has loaded up in working RAM, when it gives you the answer, then all of a sudden, poof, like you can take the same exact model and you can get something that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times better as a response out of it. And then the same thing will be true for FSD. And so that's something that's coming and really exciting to see their ability to do that. And I mean, it's one of the things that people have a lot of questions like, okay, hey, is this all stuff that's only possible because they're running these models on hardware 4? And I think it somewhat remains to be seen what we'll be able to do with hardware 3, but it certainly allows us to explore the frontier of what is possible with a fully artificial intelligence, like neural net, a digital neural net, and some digital cameras that act as a brain and a set of eyes. Can that actually drive a car as good as or better than a human? And Elon certainly seems to think yes. And based on his recent comments, we're looking at potentially surpassing human driving
next quarter, right?
Safety, in the next quarter. So crazy.
He said that stuff for a while. I hope that he's right this time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, I would agree. I've seen him making these predictions for a long time, and I always wondered when he made those predictions, like, how is that going to be possible? Like, I don't understand how we're going to actually make that happen. And of course, he has information that we don't, and so maybe he's right. But I was always very skeptical. But
Me too.
My understanding of machine learning and the progress, and then the rate of progress that we're seeing these days, like just seeing how far FSD has come from, as far as customer cars are concerned, we went from version 11, which was, okay, but not great, to version 13, which is really, really, really impressive. Maybe not quite, production ready for robotaxis yet, but very close in the space of a year. And we're scaling all of the inputs that go into machine learning all at the same time. We're getting more compute, we're getting more data, we're improving our algorithms, we're working on new hardware, we're trying to figure out how to improve the overall memory that's available to the systems. And like every single one of those things is one axis on which that you can improve the overall performance. And so when you're doing multiple of them all at the same time, I think that it's at least reasonable to think that we'll make progress at the same rate that we made last year, if not faster progress. So like, where are we going to be at the end of 2025? And I think that, at this point in time, I would be surprised if Elon's not right. Before, I would have been surprised if Elon was right in his timeline predictions. Now I'm going to be surprised if he's not right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the most interesting thing is he's always like, we'll solve it next year. Like, it's coming in 2026. We're still a year away. Like, it's later this year. This is like the first time in a long time where he said, like, it will be solved next quarter. This is like, they must be running versions on the robotaxi that are scaled, that are working, that they feel very confident about. If he's going to come out publicly in an interview and make that kind of claim, he knows the memes. I mean, that it's 2 weeks away. He references it with SpaceX too, right? We take the going from, like, what is it? We take the impossible and make it late, or something like that is his joke. So, I mean, they caught a booster out of the air a month ago. They're going to do it a couple months ago. They're going to do it again on Monday. Like, they're really making things happen. Like, I believe in what he's doing at this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of credibility has come back for his timelines, specifically, well, Tesla's timelines. Once Ashok, the leader of AI for Tesla, put that initial sort of like, hey, this is how we're gonna hit, like, this is when we're gonna hit these metrics and like these milestones for FSD V13 and all that good stuff, and then they hit them. I mean, maybe they missed slightly, but they were within weeks, right? Versus like they were literally within 2 weeks, versus before he would say 2 weeks and it was 2 years, right? So there's now some credibility that has returned from their approach.
Totally.
And it's so exciting to watch. And I agree with you. I think the comment of saying like, hey, like they are now giving guidance. It seems like now they're giving guidance based on actual things that are happening internally that they're seeing with their two eyes, instead of trying to extrapolate forward based on what they're having while trying to hit those goals. Trying to be educated and trying to be, trying to think about it in a proper way. But because they were working with such a novel solution to such a novel problem, of course it's going to be difficult still. When you keep saying the wrong thing, when you keep being wrong over and over again, what you think is going to happen. But I think that's coming back. I think that confidence in the timeline's coming back for sure.
Yeah, there was a period I remember, like, after 12.3.6, that was like the default version on like pretty much everyone's car for like
Yeah.
the last year. There was a period of time where they released like 12.4 that only went to like the early access testers group. And I'm not in that group, unfortunately.
If someone from Tesla is watching, put them on that group, damn it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But
And
there
we
was
need
a period
James
of-
Douma on that group too.
Yes.
There you go. There you go. But there was a period of time where they released 12.4 to a small group, and it went out to that group. And I just remember watching a few videos from like Dirty Tesla and like Chuck, and being like, well, there's a bunch of regressions here. Tesla's AI team seems to be stuck figuring out how to scale this approach with the neural nets like to the next level. And then they never released that full. And then 12.5 came out, and it seemed like they were back on track. I remember Elon said something like, we're training this on too much intervention data instead of like the correct driving behavior. And then it seemed to pick up from there. Overall, though, I think the most interesting thing is they refused to put like release notes in V12 for the longest time. It was like that generic, like almost like a joke at one point, like we've replaced all the code, blah, blah. It never really seemed like a comment or like a release note that the public should have even have gotten. And now they've seemed to have laid out like a roadmap to finishing version 13. It's a package of these different pieces. And if they feel like that's release note worthy at this point, they've, in my opinion, at least cleared that like hump of, we know what we need to do next in order to scale this. Like we have the Cortex like thing online at Giga Texas. We just need to like go out and spend the time to do it. And it didn't feel like that for a period of time last year. So that to me is like the most promising part of the whole experience.